Hello, welcome to thoughtraid. Today we're talking about racial issues, the police, and all the things that you might find offensive. So hang out, chat, and let's get into it. Welcome to thoughtraid, where we take thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Tim. Brandon is also here today, and we're here with Darius Taylor.
How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. We asked Darius to join us today because his background is in criminal justice. As you can tell, he's also a black man. So
this weekend
this
weekend only.
But guys, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the world right now, especially I don't want to say we finished up with Black Lives Matter because it's still going on. But there's a lot of social issues right now, racial issues, police issues, government issues, just so many issues. And Darius has a really good perspective, I believe, on all this, as not only a black man, but also somebody who frequently engages with police officers, training them, and all that. So Darius, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about your background, what life was like for you growing up as a black guy in the black community or in a community, your schooling, all that stuff.
Okay. Well, I started out with a associate's degree in criminal justice. One of the big things that drove me to that was growing up, I pretty much grew up in the hood, as you say, the ghetto, or impoverished neighborhood. Yes. Yeah. A lot of people don't really think about it, but we have some of the roughest areas in North Carolina. Piedmont Circle is a very large one. Cleveland projects. Those areas are considered high target areas. I grew up in both. I've always lived my life to change the community, especially when I was a kid. All of my family at some point have gone through drugs, abusive relationships, things like that. So I wanted to break the mold, and I wanted to learn as much as I can about being a police officer. When I was growing up, when we were in the impoverished neighborhoods, there were a lot of gang life. I grew up around a lot of gangs. I was asked to join gangs a lot when I was growing up. As a large kid, you can imagine that a lot of gangs wanted muscle.
I was just like when you're selecting people for dodgeball or something.
Exactly.
You always want the biggest, fittest, strongest people on your team.
Exactly. And especially in that neighborhood growing up, if you are the poorest of the poor, that means that you would do anything for the money. And I grew up with a father who was addicted to drugs. So that led us down the path where we never really got ahead. One time, my mother moved us to the country, Yadkin County, and there is the first time I actually saw racism.
And when you say move to the country, where'd you move?
So place right around the street from Bush Elementary.
Okay.
It's a very diverse area as far as there's a lot of, white people. There's a very diverse side of white people. Not all of them are rednecks. A lot of them are doing better for themselves, want better for themselves. So there's a lot of different, same thing in the black neighborhoods. There are a lot of different levels to it. I grew up in the trailer park around there. So the first time I ever heard the N-word came out of a boy's mouth when me and my brother were riding bikes. Never heard it before other than, my father saying it, something like that. Never really occurred to me. Didn't really seem offensive.
Were they addressing you or did they just say it?
They were addressing us.
Okay.
Yes. It was something, I guess the boy, and later on, we actually became friends. He said that his father used to always say it.
And
so
what race was he?
He was white.
Okay.
Yes. His father would say it all the time. And so he assumed that's what black people were. His father would say it all the time when he looked at TV. And so we never really fit in until we joined the football team. And so then me and my brothers became like local heroes because we led them to state championships. So all of a sudden now we're great friends with everybody.
Yeah.
But that's how it goes in that community. If you're doing something for someone, then your race kind of melts away. But if you're just there,
just existing,
exactly, there's always going to be some kind of friction.
Yeah.
Then from there, I grew up in Kernersville. Mostly, you would consider the upper side of Kernersville. There were a lot of well-off families. So a lot of my friends were well-off. So I grew up in those kinds of neighborhoods, talking and riding with them, hanging out with their parents. Their parents always assumed, well, he's always here, so therefore he's my child. So I was raised by a lot of families.
Was that a weird transition for you going from, I guess what you were saying, the projects of Winston-Salem to the upper-ish crust of Kernersville, where it seems like people weren't as stressed?
Exactly.
Maybe stressed in a different way. I don't want to say just because you have money, you're not stressed.
Right. It definitely was different. I learned so much that I never would have thought of. I have a friend whose mother is from Britain. And so when she saw me, she didn't see a black person, because overseas, they don't really break you down into race. It's more of how do you contribute to society. And so she instantly picked me up and took me as one of her own. Another one of my friends is a Filipino mother. Same thing. Picked me up, took me as one of her own. It got to when I started dating around that time that I found racism in weird places.
And how old were you?
I was 15, 16. And so I ended up dating white girls. And so it was very difficult, I would say. A lot of families weren't comfortable with it.
But the girls were, obviously.
Yes. I'll say this. It was something I had to learn, that it's not necessarily they were comfortable with it, or it's just something new, something forbidden, something, the parents didn't want to talk about. And so I was definitely, I've dated a white guy, but I've never dated a black guy. And so I was a trying out process. And I can never really blame them because, everyone does it. You're a teenager, like never dated a black guy, want to try it. So it was one of those things where as I got older, I realized it. And so I kind of lost the value of myself because I always thought to myself, well, why are my relationships only lasting like a month? But then meeting their families and things like that, I was able, the way I am, my demeanor, turn them around. So it wasn't just, my daughter's dating a black guy. My daughter's dating a pretty cool guy. Like that's how it always ended up.
Yeah.
I went to college in Georgia, Georgia Southern. There is where I first encountered real racism. Like North Carolina, I like to say it's like a seasoning on a chicken. Like it's there. You taste the seasoning. You're like, okay. But when you go to Georgia, it is downright in the roots. Have you ever been to a place called Forsyth County, Georgia? They are one of the most racist counties in America.
Now, what does that look like in comparison? Because I know here, I grew up in Davie County, and the N-word was thrown around here and there, and people would make commentary if you just engaged them one-on-one. But out in public, it wasn't as apparent, I guess. Like you'd go to the grocery store, Food Line was like the hub of Davie County, and so you'd go there and you'd see black, white, Hispanic, whatever, and people would be like, hey, how you doing? The whole neighborhood mentality,
right?
But you could still tell that it was there.
Yes. In Georgia, it's on the platter. It's right out in front of you. I was told very often, you're not supposed to be here. Well, I go to college right down there, and they're just like, well, you need to stay down there, because if you weren't bouncing a ball, if you weren't doing something productive for the school, you were just a black guy going to Georgia Southern. So I did criminal justice. I didn't really take up any sports. I just kind of wanted to go there. I had a friend who, he was there a year before me. He loved it. He would tell me all the time, it's amazing. It's a great place. When I got down there, it was a beautiful place. But as soon as you stepped off campus is where you ran into the issues. I was pulled over in a car with me, my girlfriend at the time, who was white, another one of my friends who was white in the back seat. We were pulled over, and the officer did not give me any reasonable explanation why he pulled us over. It just came down to, well, you were driving and I saw you. And he pulls us all out of the car. One by one, he'd start talking to us. I'm thinking, well, does he think we're drunk? Does he think that, we're selling drugs or what? And he comes over to me. I have a full conversation with him. I tell him exactly why I'm there. I'm just here with my friends. We're visiting her home. We just left. We're heading back to school. And he goes, wow, boy, you sure can talk to the cops. I was like, well,
what kind of comment is that?
Exactly. That down there, though, it's normal. It's very normal. It's just like you know how to talk to the cops. You've obviously been in trouble before because you know how to talk to us. Mm-hmm. It never was that I just speak really eloquently. I just learned my language skills very quickly. It made it easy for me to talk to anybody. But instantly, when you turn on the white voice, the officers, you have something to hide. So that's when I learned that in order to be Black in the South, there's a switch. Mm-hmm. You have to turn it on whenever you feel authority around. And then you can turn it off whenever you're at home comfortable. And when I came back to North Carolina, because that was very traumatic for me, young Black kid, didn't have any idea what was going on. He put me in handcuffs, put me on the ground. I had no idea why. He said he was searching the vehicle, but my friends who were white were just standing there. No handcuffs or anything.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And you guys were same age group, same life season, same everything.
Exactly. I think.
So what were your friends saying at this time? Were they like, what are you doing, man? Like,
they were deathly afraid, because now it's more of a cultural norm to take out your phone and going, what are you doing? Then it was more, and this was in, I'd say 2008, 2007, 2008. It was very controversial to stand between an officer and somebody. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things where if we're quiet, he won't look into us. He found a needle in my bag, and I had to go, sir, I'm diabetic. I've been diabetic since I was 6, and he did not believe me. It took a long time before I was talking to him. Backup is now coming, talking to him. They did 4 different tests on the needle to prove that there's nothing in it. I was like, you can smell insulin. Like, take it out. It smells like insulin. And he was like, all right, so you're diabetic. I was like, well, there's a meter that tests my blood sugar right beside the needle. You didn't even open it to take a look at it. Mm-hmm. And so he lets us go. After us being there for an hour and a half, we get back to school, and I instantly said, I can't deal with this. I started having really bad insomnia. Every time a cop would pass, I'd get really frustrated, and I just said, I'm going back to North Carolina where I know the racism. Mm-hmm. I can spot it coming.
So you didn't finish school there?
Exactly.
Okay, so what'd you do, transition or transfer out?
Yes, I transferred out, ended up going to Forsyth Tech, where I started working at GameStop. Mm-hmm. And then I decided that I wanted to change, because the best way, in my opinion, to change the world is to be a part of the change. Mm-hmm. How do you fix a body that's sick? You go from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And so when I first started to work my process into being a police officer, I had to deal with a lot of agencies telling me that where I come from does not make good officers. Mm-hmm. That was a big thing, is that coming from where I lived do not make good officers. They instantly assumed that I had somebody in my family who was a gang member, somebody in my family with felonies, and so it became really hard. And then so after that, I took a long break, and then I got back into school, and I started going to GTCC, where I met real officers who would tell me every day, like, don't let anybody tell you just because you're Black, you can't be a cop. And I learned from a great mentor of mine, Brad Johnson at Guilford Tech. He was the first African-American officer I've ever met. He was the first one who would tell me, I grew up in Danville, same situation you did, mm-hmm. and I was able to make it. Now, I had a lot of rough patches, but I was at least able to make it. And so when he retired and he came here, he said, I wanted to go somewhere that teaches people over policing. Everywhere else, you're a police officer, but you're not a person. Here, you have to be both. And they're very responsible like that. And that's why I love working with them. Mm-hmm. I teach cops about constitutional law every day. Anybody who has any issues with tutoring, they need to come to me to learn something. I help with everything. Mm-hmm. So it's something very passionate to me.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of want to use that as a springboard to jump into the next topic, which is current events. Because before the stream, we were just hanging out and talking, and you were mentioning about the disparity between what cops should believe. You were talking about the sword versus the shield, right, and how the police are meant to be there to serve and protect. But you said that a lot of the police that you see coming in really don't the qualifiers. They're not
Right.
really taught constitutional law. They're not taught the reasoning. Like their modus operandi for getting into it is basically, I want to wield a gun. I want to drive fast cars.
Exactly.
So talk about that a little bit. Like what are the actual expectations for, okay, here's what you have to do to become a police officer versus here's the psychological expectations you need to have in order to do this. Like, what's the difference there?
So something that I always tell people, which is scary. You know the qualification you have to be a cop? Have a high school diploma or a GED.
Right.
That should terrify you, because when it comes to this situation, someone can come in completely untrained, unknowing about the criminal justice system at all. They just heard you can drive a fast car and you can shoot guns. And so instantly, bam, that's what they want to do. It's hard to break that mindset, especially when it comes to teaching that you're not a cop, you're a citizen. You uphold the laws, but you're still a citizen. A lot of officers see themselves as being right above that. They're above a normal citizen. And the mentality is there should be what I consider the sword and shield process. So police officers are the shield. They are there to protect and serve. They are there to help people. And then they get you to where the sword is, which is the justice system. The sword should always be the justice system. No one should be able to take the law into their own hands, including officers. You cannot be the judge and the jury and the executioner. You have to be able to separate yourselves. And I think that that's where a lot of officers are getting in trouble right now. They go straight from the shield to I'm the sword. I cut out crime. Your job isn't to cut crime. Your job is to protect. I believe that that's the mentality that we're stuck in right now.
So when what is the course that you have to go through to become an officer? You were talking about that earlier.
Yes. BLET, Basic Law Enforcement Training.
Gotcha. So talk to me a little bit about that, because when you were talking about the expectations and like how long that takes, what exactly you get in order to get to the other side, or what you have to get to the other side. And once you have that qualification, what you're equipped with, it's vastly different than what you actually need to perform the job.
Exactly. I would say being a police officer is all about life experiences. You cannot go into this field without knowing or understanding policing, because a lot of people get into it because they just saw it on TV, it looked fun. You know, people look at Cops, CSI, Miami, stuff like
boys,
that.
What you gonna do? I mean, I love that growing up.
Exactly.
And it just seems so cool because there'd be all the bad guys, you go bust them, and
right.
It just seems so like, I mean, every guy that I knew growing up always wanted to be, that guy. You wanted to be the Mel Gibson. You wanted to be the freaking, what's his name from Gladiator? Russell Crowe?
Yes, yeah. You got to have a certain machismo to be an officer. And if you feel that before you actually understand that machismo needs to leave you before you even enter the doors. Because when you think that you are more masculine, braver than other people, when you are stronger than other people, you have to lure that over them. And that's where you get so many officers who go straight to hands-on before they use their mind and think about it. That's why a high school diploma, we learn in high school how to memorize. We don't learn social structures. There are a lot of people who go through high school never understanding that there's a world outside of them. That's what college is for. You go to college and you learn that there's something different. There's something bigger than yourself. So when you come straight from high school and you jump into a field where you don't know that there's a world outside of yourself or a world outside of your social structure, that's when you hit up a lot of confusion, confrontation. You lose the will to want to do your job, because instantly every time you do something, you're met with force and you're wondering why. It's because it's a culture shock. I think that the mentality of being an officer is not looked at enough. The education on being an officer needs to change, because there's a lot of focusing on the physical aspect of it. There's a lot of focusing on, shooting, basic laws, things like that. But they don't get into why are you pulling your gun out? Were there steps before that? Officers now train most of their time on the range. Shooting weapons, most of their time they're learning basic self-defense, but no one's
Mhm.
teaching them mental defense.
Mm-hmm.
How can you use your brain to get out of situations?
Yeah. So, earlier we were talking about all the stuff going on in social media, and not just social media. I don't want to take all the value away from it by saying it's just social media in our country. What's the girl's name? Michaela
Bryant.
Michaela Bryant. Everything
Mhm.
that just happened with the George Floyd trial that just wrapped up.
Mhm.
And then there's that comment that was made by LeBron James recently. There's so
Right.
much going on. And, the reason I keep drawing back to social media is because there's so many of us that aren't, myself included, I'm not educated on this stuff. I have an opinion, but a lot of times my opinion is unfounded because I don't have the knowledge or expertise behind it to say this is what it is. That's why I don't say many things on social media about this stuff,
Right.
But there are so many people that jump to conclusions. And you and I were talking earlier about looking at the reason why, not making assumptions.
Right.
So when it comes to things like Black Lives Matter, Michaela, Trump's presidency,
Yes.
all that stuff, would you speak from your position on where you think the actual responsibility should lie, or who should actually be called forth to take responsibility for what's going on? What are your thoughts on all that?
So I think it all comes down to individual responsibility, individual accountability, because in order for us to move forward, we have to realize that we are broken as a society. There are things that we have to accept that we are just skipping over. Like, there are bad people. They're not bad officers. They're not bad Black people. They're not bad white people. They're just bad individual people. And when you take it as a total, that's where people are getting confused. Some people go, well, every person that's Black is up to something. Every officer that is out there to protect and serve is up to something. They're just going after you for one reason or another. People forget that they're just bad people. Mm-hmm. And then if you don't accept that, then you get caught up in the lie that we tell each other, where I don't have to know this. I don't have to know that they're just bad people. Mm-hmm. All I know is that the government is telling me that I need to be on a heightened awareness, which this is where officers are. The government says I need to be heightened aware right now. I need to double check, recheck everything before I do anything. And that includes thinking about saving a life. In the Michaela Bryant situation, I think more people instantly jumped on a white officer shooting a Black teenage girl instead of why. Why were they called out there in the first place? That has completely jumped over. We instantly went to, why did the officer shoot her? Well, having to separate myself from being a Black male who knows for a fact that there are officers out there gunning for you. Mm-hmm. They want you off the street. They want you to listen and obey, but they don't really know you. So I have to take that part out of myself and look at it as, okay, someone who has learned criminal justice is a part of it every day. Let's take a look and break it down. One, the officer came. There was a girl with a knife standing there. He did not know who was what. He saw someone rushing another girl with a knife. Now, everybody jumped on that, including LeBron James. He instantly went out and said something about the officer, posted a picture of him and said, "You're next." And that got a lot of views. Even though he deleted it, it went a lot of places. And he ended up recanting what he had to say because he didn't know the situation. In the real situation, the officer took a life to save a life. And you don't know how much that weighs on an officer. If anybody who says that they can kill somebody and go back to their job is like a sociopath. Officers have to have mental checks, and instantly that's what they'll tell you to do. You get 3 days to yourself. You get a couple psych briefings, but then you're back on the job working 13-hour shifts like nothing happened. You have to put it behind you. You can't just put behind you killing somebody. So this officer in this situation, and only this situation, I want to preface that. People need to take a look at situations, not the individuals that happened. So when people say, well, she had a knife and they shot her, they wouldn't have done that to a white person. Well, let's take a look at the Capitol. When the gentleman rammed two officers, he got out, brandished a knife, and they shot him. And people didn't bat an eye. They're just like, that person was dangerous. He had a knife. He was already almost killed somebody. And he ended up killing one of the officers. So obviously he should have been shot. Now you take race out of it and you put the Bryant situation in that. And you have to go, that young lady had a knife. She was going after another young lady. If she would have got there, if that cop hesitated, if that cop grabbed his taser and it did not drop her, because I've seen skinny young men who can brush off a taser like it was nothing.
Wow.
It's all about your pain threshold, and you don't know someone's pain threshold as soon as you meet them. Mm-hmm. It's not like you instantly know, okay, a taser can take that person out.
Well, also, if you're engaging with somebody and you're trying to stab them or something, I mean, there is the idea that you could not be mentally stable, but there could be other factors like methamphetamines and whatnot, which are going to play into your threshold. It's like I was watching a video on YouTube earlier of this. It was a naked dude just running down the street, and the commentary was, your insurance company will never believe this. And what he was doing was like he was running headfirst into cars' headlights, and then he would get up and then pick another car and do the same thing. Right. It's like, is this person mental? Are they actually on something? Because that's not normal, you know. And for somebody to be engaging, like, I'm going to stab, that's not normal. So you never know,
right? And when you take away race and you look at the facts were she could have killed somebody. Mm-hmm. And so if the officer would have waited, she was screaming, drop the knife. He was screaming, stop. She continued. So that means that, and I get it. People in the heat of the moment, it's hard to say that they don't know what they're doing. Could she hear him? Could she have gathered herself by the time she got to this girl with the knife and stopped? We don't know.
Well, that's just an issue of personal responsibility, because that's where we're going with this next. It's like, going into this, there are just like Samson. You know the story of Samson?
Yeah, Samson and Delilah. Samson and Delilah.
Yeah. So Samson was told not to go. What country was that, Brandon? Philistines. Go to the land of the Philistines, and it was something like, it was several miles, and every step he took, he had the opportunity to turn around because he was doing something he knew he was not supposed to be doing. And in situations like this, it's like you escalate, and it's like, okay, well, what led to her getting the knife? There was obviously an argument or something. Okay, well, what led to the argument? Disagreement. What led to that? Well, you guys have difference of opinion, and it's like, there's a personal responsibility to know what your triggers are and to know when you need to just walk away. And if you're not taught that, there are consequences regardless of whether or not you think it's fair. Like if I just stab Darius like this, and it's, I don't know, he said, I'm going to kill your wife and I'm just protecting my wife. Well, that is a circumstance, but there's also a consequence. Like he's going to die and I'm going to be held accountable for my actions regardless of what my impetus was, and I don't know, like, what do you think about personal responsibility in our country right now, especially considering things like education? And like you said, from your perspective, there are so many people that will say, okay, well, the black statistic is such because most black households are raised by a single mother with several kids in a hood. And it's like, okay, well, because that happened, there are certain things you're not taught, and that's why the statistics are so high. But then you have people that come out of that same statistic on the other side and make different decisions. Right. So what do you think about personal responsibility in all this?
Personal responsibility plays a huge role. And we are so lacking that in this whole country right now. It's just the same thing what's been going on with COVID. The personal responsibility of wearing a mask and trying to protect others was thrown out the window. There are so many people who are just like, I will never wear a mask. But then you're not socially responsible for what's going on. So therefore, you're looked at as a bad person. But also at the same time, if I'm wearing a mask and I do my best to be responsible for me, then I'm helping everybody else be responsible. Because me personally, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to make sure that I'm taken care of. So therefore, the rest of the community who looking at me going, that dude's wearing a mask, I'm wearing my mask, boom, everybody now is socially responsible. We have skipped that. We have forgotten a lot of where we need to be socially. I will say this, going through history, we've had a lot of social responsibility. You look at the moment that slaves were free. The social responsibility of Black America was to go out, find land, and be farmers, take care of each other's family, be a community. We have forgotten that. Civil rights led us to social responsibility is the community needs to be free. Therefore, I need to be free. Therefore, if I can get my community free, everybody's going to be happy and safe. And now we've completely forgot about that. It's no longer, I need to take care of my community. I need to take care of myself. We need to be responsible for each other. It's all about now, somebody's going to take care of me. The government, they're going to take care of me. Individually, I really don't have any responsibilities. Something's going wrong in my life. It's somebody else's problem. Mm-hmm. We've completely left the social responsibility side, and now we're on individuals take what they want. And same thing with authority. Mm-hmm. Authority plays a big part in that. If you have authority, you're responsible to yourself to take care of others. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. That is your responsibility, is to take care of others. But when you are somebody who seeks power, who goes out and has this gluttonous feel for power, then it's, I'm going to take my power. If you don't give me my power, I'm going to take it. That's where police officers are. There are a lot of police officers like, if you don't respect me, I'm going to take my respect. And they go hands-on, throw you on the ground. Mm-hmm. That's where social responsibility has left us. Mm-hmm. Because that's somebody's father, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's wife, that's someone's mother. We've completely forgotten that. And so now it's mine. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take my respect. I'm going to take away your dignity to help build mine.
So let's take that concept, because, mm-hmm. We're talking about police and everything going on right now. A lot of people view police that way. And there's a really good guy that goes to our church named Jeremiah Dabb. I was talking with him several months ago about all this stuff. And he was just talking about how that stuff really weighs on you,
yes.
And a lot of people don't look at the day-to-day. They don't see what you're going through. They don't see the struggles. They don't see the exhaustion. They'll just say, well, because you've served as a police officer, you've been in the military, you've done this all your life, this one bad thing, and we're going to write you off.
Right.
It's really easy to demonize them and say, well, okay, they all suck.
Right.
But, looking at personal responsibility in a similar light, what do you think that has to do with all the racial stuff right now? And not just Black racial stuff.
Right.
I'm talking also, like, we were talking downstairs earlier about the Asian Lives Matter thing. And when that started happening a couple months ago, I was like, what are you talking about? Because I'm Asian. I've never experienced, I have experienced racism, but I think it's a choice to say, okay, well, I'm going to use this as a crutch, and I'm going to have a pity party, and I'm not going to live above it.
Right.
Like, for you, you grew up in a very difficult situation too, and you've made different choices. So where do you think personal responsibility and accountability lies when it comes to the Black community?
It comes, and this is something that I know a lot of people are probably going to give me flack for, because there are social things that stop people from changing their lives. Mm-hmm. There is something that is always holding back a Black person. It could be financial, it could be, racism, it could be social, economic situations. It's always something that's going to hold you back. Mm-hmm. And it's built into our system. It's something that, I can't get a loan because the person looked at me and went, well, obviously he doesn't pay his bills, but they don't know the full story.
Yeah, well, I've also heard stories of how, and I didn't think about this until somebody told me about it, but about how the idea of a silver spoon. You
Right.
look at America now and you think, okay, well, anybody can just go out there and take it. But then you have white families that have been landowners for years, and it's inherited in their family. And it's so much easier for them to say, okay, well, if I can't do it on my own, my family owns 30 acres out in the country. Whereas for Black people, and even Asian people too, I guess, the statistic of landowners or real estate owners is so much lower just because it's a recent history where blacks were even able to do that.
Exactly.
You know?
You get, and this is something that I think that a lot of people forget. Slavery wasn't that long ago. You know, my great grandmother was a slave. I'm only 3 generations removed from slavery.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that should shock people. It's not something that people can go, well, slavery was so long ago. It was. Why can't you forgive it? You know, why can't you forgive and move on?
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's like it's not that long ago. You know, wounds take time to heal, and so when it comes to helping people, I think that the country is still trying to heal wounds. And so they're not looking at it as, okay, this person does good things. They are smart with their money. Because there's one thing that I've learned in black families, and it goes everywhere. It's most of the time, the person passes on debt. They don't pass on, acreage. They don't pass on, money from generations. It's debt. And generational debt is something that black people really, really have against them. Mm-hmm. It's not fair. It's not right. And it's hard to overcome. But when we realize that social responsibility plays a big part in that, then it's our responsibility to figure out how can we help alleviate so that way they can elevate. And we've gone away from it. Everyone is out to protect themselves. And I get it. People are going to say, well, banks aren't out to protect themselves. Banks are just making smart business moves. But when you take a person's number, their credit number, and you say, well, this is going to define them. Well, a lot of black people have bad credit because, well, that's all we've had is debt. We haven't had the chance to build credit. Like, if my mother gave me a credit card at 16 or 18 to help me build credit, that'd be great. That's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. She helped me pay it off every month. My credit score ended up being an 850, and that's fantastic. I bought my first car. I paid on it every month. Sometimes we don't have that luxury. Yeah. A lot of times you get parents working 2-3 jobs. Mm-hmm. They can't get a credit card. How are they going to get you a credit card?
My dad, growing up, was an orphan. My dad's from Thailand, full-blooded Thai, Laotian, one of those two. We believe he's Thai just because he's born. Anyways, but he was an orphan at the age of like 6 or 7, and then he came over here and had nothing. He was never taught finances. He was never taught relationships. He was brought up in a household where his sister's husband pretty much just used him as work.
Right.
Whatever. And he was never taught ethical, financial, whatever, and so he had his first wife when he was 15, had his first kid at 15. And then he left that wife and then got together with my mom and then had me and then had my brother. But, we also grew up in a trailer park here in Winston. And this is coming from a mixed white Asian background. And even my mom's family, they were white, but they were not taught finances the same way that some people were. She was not taught about credit. Growing up, my parents were like, credit cards are the devil. Yes. It was because they feared finances, And so thinking about that, I remember I had a conversation with my dad one time because growing up in Davie County on the border of Oak Valley and Bermuda Run where people have, or it seems like people have money, you never know. Right. Because we lived in a trailer, I was made fun of. And the kids didn't really know the difference. They just knew that a trailer was less than what they had. Right. They didn't really know that, like you were saying earlier, we're taught to memorize. We're not taught social structures. We're taught, okay, well, this is good, this is bad, but we're not taught how to engage with people, that people have value, And so I made a lot of financial blunders too. I had a car repossessed. I made a lot of really stupid mistakes. And just thinking about that, I didn't inherit a lot of money from my parents. I didn't inherit any land from my parents. My parents had it really rough, and they did the best they could. My dad is an amazing person. He's had drug addictions in the past. He's had alcohol addictions. He has had anger issues. But, it's like when you look at the person as a whole and you see their value and you look at their why instead of their current. It's like, why are you this way? Why are you going through this? Darius, why did you make the decision you made? Brandon, why did you make the decisions? Officer, whatever, like, why did you decide to put your knee on George Floyd's neck? Why? Like, what led to that? Where did you learn this? You know, and you were talking about the police earlier having, what was it? Mental health.
Yes.
Like mental health support for police, because as you were saying, you can't just get back into the game 3 days after killing somebody and be okay.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, if you've been doing this for a while and mentally you're unstable, you need more support. So let's focus on that instead of. I mean,
exactly.
it's important to.
Right, and this is why I say police need to spend less time at the range and more time talking one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the kind of change that we're talking about when it comes to police reform. It's not fire every cop. It's not, put them on blast every time they're out doing their job. It's change the training, change the mind state, change the us against them. That's exactly what it is. There's something called the thin blue line. The thin blue line is where you step to make sure that you're protected from the other side. And so a lot of officers walk that thin blue line where on one side, their buddies, their officers, their fellow brothers have their back, and the other side is the citizens. So you can retreat to that side of the blue line whenever you feel like you're about to be attacked or you're being attacked, and they will protect you. That's kind of where we are when it comes to police, I'd say, hiding things. Body cam footage has made life a lot easier for people who are saying they're wrongfully convicted. And when you look at the blue line aspect of it, there are a lot of things in place to protect officers. There are a lot less in place to protect civilians. And officers in general have to look at themselves and go, do I want to be protected by the people who are hiding things from the public? Or do I want to be out in the public showing the world that I had to make this decision for this reason?
Mm-hmm.
And I will accept whatever happens next. And that's where we get the ones that are trying to do great, the ones that are out there doing the best that they can, putting their life on the line, protecting civilians every day. And the ones who see other cops doing wrong, but they can't say anything because of that thin blue line.
Mm-hmm.
They want to come out and say, hey, what you did was racist. What you did was sexist. But on that other side of the line, if I don't have his back, no one's going to have my back. And so when we put this officer in the Bryant case, where he was out there, and I honestly think that he did what he could to save a life. Now he's afraid because the next time he goes out and there's a situation where someone's life's on the line, he's going to think twice. Because is that person black? Do I have time to talk to that person before this happens?
Mm-hmm.
Officers' mental health weighs on them so much because they have to wear so many hats. Social workers, they have to be babysitters, guardsmen. They have to do so much in a given day. And let's be honest, no one calls the police when you're having a good day. There's no one out there calling the police going, I just want to check on you, making sure you're good.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get the underbelly, the seedy parts of the government, you get the rough end of the politics, and then you go out into the world and you see civilians that are just out there sometimes to do bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It weighs on you. I don't know too many officers that are happy without finding someone that they love and cherish and they hold them very close.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think the big situation comes in of mental health. If you're not mentally prepared for this job, and no one knows that they are, I don't care what anyone says, you should know from day one if you're going to be mentally capable of this. When you're working 4 13-hour shifts, when you've got a mandatory 13-hour shift going on, you've got overnights, you've got first, second, third shift, you're swapping back and forth. You can't sleep. You don't have enough money to pay for your mortgage. You don't have enough money to even get married. I know a lot of officers who are saying, I'm going to save money to get married, but they're having a hard time doing it because honestly, they have to take up so many overtime shifts just to make ends meet that, it weighs on you. Going out and arresting people who are doing bad things, and you don't see the good side of people. Mm. You just don't. And when you constantly see negativity, you internalize it. So whenever I look at one of those gritty rough officers who come off a 13-hour shift and doesn't want to talk to anybody, just wants to go home and be by himself. I understand that. I see it. I live it. I completely get where he's coming from. But then you got people who go, well, obviously he's not meant for this job. That's the person you want meant for this job. At the end of the day, when he's given everything, he can go out and still go, I just need some time to myself, and then back at it tomorrow with a smile. Not the cops who are so gung-ho that they look for any sign of approval. So when they arrest someone, you know, they're instantly like, where's my gratification? You know, I have a high quota. Everybody I arrest goes to jail. That's my thing. No one gets released. There are officers like that where they have a goal and they meet it. Then there are officers who go out on the street and it's just like, my goal is to protect. I don't have to arrest anybody. I can do my job and still be a normal person. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you hang up that cape, you know, when you take off that badge, is it possible that you're still the same human being that when you put it on? No, there's no way.
Well, you know, just thinking about positions I've had of authority, because I've had multiple jobs where I've been in positions of leadership, different social dynamics where I've been in positions of leadership. And there's always that feeling of, am I making the right decision? And guys, you know, if you're really doing something that you need to do to grow, you're going to fail 80% of the time and succeed 20% of the time, or else you're not being challenged. You know, we're not meant to be sedentary. We're not meant to just stay in our comfort zones. You know, we're always meant to be growing and improving. But also leaders. Like we were talking about Trump earlier and about how he could have done things differently. Yes. You know, and it's like, I'm just thinking to myself how much potential there was for him to have learned through his presidency to change and grow as a person. I'm really curious as to what he took away from it and how he grew, not just focusing on, well, he did this and he did that and he did this and he did that, because he definitely made a lot of blunders. And he missed a lot of opportunities to do things in a way that could have led the country in a really, really healthy direction. Right. But I think, you know, thinking back to personal responsibility, like just in my own friendships, thinking about what my responsibility was last year during COVID through all the Black Lives Matter stuff, through, you know, how I exited my previous job, right. You know, how I engage in friendships. There's so much personal responsibility where I have to look at myself first and think, okay, well, what do I need? What do I need? The Bible even says, don't call out the speck in your brother's eye before you address the log in your own eye. Right. You know? And I'm just thinking, like, what do you think it's going to take for us to get to that place? What do you think needs to happen to fix? And I know it's not just a fix. It's not something that's going to fix like that. And I know it's only truly going to be fixed through Jesus coming back. That's my own personal belief. But what do you think needs to happen for racial issues? What do you think needs to happen for police reform?
So first and foremost, we have to get to the cancer that's killing the body. And that is how we identify ourselves. When it comes to Black Americans, we have so many aspects of our culture that I think confuses people. You know, some people say, oh, you're loud, you're ignorant, you know, the music you listen to is harsh. And at some point we have to get back to, who are we? And once we figure that out, we can get our value. Once we get our value, then we can go to police officers and go, this is why I matter. These are the values that I hold to myself. So that's something that I think first that we need to address. Then comes with police reform. Police officers do not need to be swordsmen. They do not need to be out there to execute. They need to be there to protect. And at any point in time, if you say to yourself going out there in the field that, all right, I'm ready to take a life today. I'm ready, like if something happens, I'm ready to pull out my gun, and today's the day where it's probably going to happen. When you're in that mindset, when you're there going, I'm okay taking a life, because a lot of officers have to do that. Like you go out on the shift every day going, is today the day that I'm going to lose my life or take a life? and it's a mentality. And while it can be a good thing to say, all right, I got to do whatever it takes to make it home at the end of the day. But once we start putting lives over that, once you start devaluing other people and putting your values above theirs, like, I need to make it home. But doesn't that person who you just got, called saying that, my husband is hitting me, abusing me, something like that, their value matters too. They need to make it home too. And so we are forgetting that. We are leaving our personal values behind and forgetting others. And so in order to change that, we have to change the mentality. So the tree of justice needs new seeds. The tree of justice needs to branch out and change. So instead of police officers wearing every hat, or a branch that wears half the leaves of the justice system, we need to start taking some of those leaves and putting them on other branches. We need to start moving and changing the way we think of police officers and policing in the 21st century. And in order to do that, there's going to be some hard decisions that are going to have to be made on both sides, both Black and police officers. Because if we need to admit it, sometimes we put a target on ourselves. And I don't want anyone to come and say that, well, just because I'm Black, I have a target on my back. In some cases, yes. In some cases, because you're in the wrong side of the town and you're Black, that's your target. But in other times, if you know you got drugs in the car and you know that you're about to be pulled over, then why resist? Because you know you're about to take that charge. You know that something's about to happen. So now you put yourself at risk and other people at risk because you're deciding that I'm going to flee. Now, there are points in time where I will say that officers they make bad decisions because they're human. There's a human side of being a police officer that no one pays attention to. No one wants to look at the person behind the shield. So whenever someone says all officers are bad, I go, no. There are officers out there who will lay down their lives before they take their gun out of the holster.
When people were saying that through all this stuff, I have a friend that I play League of Legends with, and Derek, if you're watching, I'm talking about you. He lives, I believe, in Georgia, but he is a Black police officer. Right. And, he's very similar to you. We'll joke about things very frequently, and he has a very lighthearted approach at life, but, he's got a wife, he's got kids, and he works as a police officer. And I'm just thinking, so when all these people, especially people that are vouching for racial whatever, Black Lives Matter. Huh? 5'10". Oh, thank you. It's like they're talking about him too, and he is a Black life. So it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to separate just his Blackness apart from his vocation being a police officer? Like, is he only going to have value if he stops becoming a police officer? Like, what is it exactly?
That's exactly what Black America is doing right now. We are looking at one person, and you're going, all right, how many labels can I put on this one person? Instead of going, all right, that is a Black man wearing a badge. That label alone should give him the autonomy to say, I have a different perspective than most police officers. So take what I'm saying a little bit more seriously than somebody who has, 60, 70 different labels on them. White officer, buzz cut, that's a label. Wears glasses, that's a label. Asian officers have a lot of labels because they're like, well, how can they can't see, how come that they're allowed to have a gun and drive a car? That's a stereotype, but that's a label that gets put on them. But if you separate and you go, okay, this Black man wears a badge, so therefore he has something to say. He has something worth listening to. That is going to be where we get the reform from, is that listening to officers going, this is why we have to demand authority, because I don't feel it. I'm in danger whenever someone walks up on me and says, I don't have to listen to you. Like, it's for your safety. Now, there are officers who get out of hand with that, absolutely, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so when they have absolute power, they want to make sure that that power is upheld. And that's where you forget that people have values. And so you cannot take their power, trying to build your own.
Yeah.
And that's the big miscommunication in America.
So we have a couple more minutes, Darius. So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes on each of these. But I want you to give a message to our viewers. If you're speaking to Black Lives Matter or anything specifically racial, or somebody where they feel, okay, well, I'm being pushed down, I'm being disregarded because of my race, and I need this, I need that, which is valid also.
Right.
What is your message to them? And then 1 to 2 minutes on police, like people that are police, people that have hard feelings towards police. Like, what is your statement to them?
Well, first, when it comes to Black America, if I can just get us all on the same page, there's a movement of young African American males who just straight up say, I don't care. I don't care about how I look, how I dress, how I act. I am who I am. And while, yes, that is a good thing, but also at the same time, you're falling into the same category that like white America has put you in. You look like the thing that they fear. And so when you go out and, you look like the threat that they think you are, they're going to jump on it. And they're going to go, I had reason to. Look at them. I had reason to. Also, at the same time, we have to realize that we need to be on the same page when it comes to our message. No one's going to listen to a message that has 17 different broadcasts and no one understands exactly what they want. We have to come together and give a firm message. And so when Black Lives Matter comes through, it means that we value our lives. We value what we're trying to do in the world, and we value that we are trying to move forward. Everybody needs to get on that one message. Our lives actually equate to something. And then when you get to the police officers, I want to tell every officer out there, not every Black male is trying to run from you. Not every Black male is carrying drugs, carrying a gun. Everybody deserves their own autonomy. Everybody deserves their own space, their own will. So when you see these Black Americans and you see these Black males and you're thinking to yourself, well, what are they doing? Instead ask, are they in a situation that it matters what they're doing? If you're standing outside of a gas station, talking and hanging out with your friends, is that a gang or is that just friends hanging out? You have to take yourself off or take the badge off. Before you enter any situation, before you're a badge, you're a person. And you have to be a person the whole time. Your job is not to be a cop. Your job is to serve and protect. Your title is cop, but your person is the person or is the thing that you're trying most to be, a citizen. You're not a citizen soldier. You're not a para soldier who is out there held by the government to control. You are there to serve the people who have put you in office. And that's exactly what it is. Our tax dollars pay your salary. Now, a lot of officers don't want to hear that. Second you bring that up, it's a bad day. But you have to realize it's true. Same thing with politicians. We pay your salary. So therefore, your message should be the message that we give you. Same thing with policing. Your policing should be the power that we give you. No one is giving you power to execute. No one's giving you the power to take. Your only job is to shield us. You're not the sword, you are the shield. And that means that you shield everybody. That means Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, does not matter. Your shield should be there to protect us all. Your sword should not be fixed on one thing. That's the big message I want to give.
Yeah. That's real good. Yeah. Well, Darius, thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And guys, if you disagree, that's cool. If you agree, that's cool too. Let us know in the comments what you think about all the stuff that Darius and I talked about today. And if you have any questions or whatever that you feel like were not addressed or different topics that we need to expand on, let us know as well. We'd love to talk about them. But anyways, guys, we want to thank you for watching. We broadcast Monday, Friday, Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be live again this Monday where we get naked talking about stuff going on in our own lives. But yeah, I guess we'll see you.
I can see far away from where I've been. He says I see a potential. I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive. We sing Jesus, you're alive.